Sure.
Okay.
That's good.
Can you hear now, Ben?
I hear you. It's just so I'm deaf. That's all. Like I'm 100 years old. The left ear is 100 years old.
All right. So Ben, this is going to be a presentation that we'll be showing at the University of Texas in Dallas.
Right.
And it's going to be commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Nuremberg trials. So, you know, all of us are very lucky that we're going to have during this commemoration, we get to have the last living prosecutor from Nuremberg, Benjamin Ferencz.
I'm alive still. Oh my God.
That's you. To come to speak to us.
All right.
And before we begin, I have with me my colleagues, Professor Crystal Nelson and Professor Michael Bryant. And you're the star of the show. We are just the backup players.
Are you Wilson? Wilson? Who's Wilson? Who's this nice young lady here going over the corner?
Oh, Ben, I'm Kristen Nelson, and I have had the pleasure of working with you alongside Michael Basler on a book chapter about some of the lesser known aspects of your life relating to your work on property restitution.
Huh. Well, that's good. That's good. Did I get anything there? I'm just looking at the official record of the trial of war criminals, to checking some dates here. And what's today's date? Today is you don't know September from October. So today is September 12th, is it? On September 10th. Unbelievable. 10th, on September 15th, 1947, filed September 22nd, I made the opening statement for the prosecution in the biggest murder trial in human history. 29 September 1947. That's pretty close time. How many years ago? 75 years ago. Yeah. So that's the anniversary. I was 27 years old. I'm now 100. That's a pretty big gap. So I think that's an interesting point. I've forgotten, of course, the dates, but I've got the judgment here was in April, and the sentencing was in April. Anyway, so there we are. I've been at it for a long time, and should I sum it up in 2 words, or 2 hours, or 2 years, or 2 days? How much time do you think I need to know what to put into it? Just to say we were trying to prevent it from happening. Well, we haven't been doing so hot. It's getting not so good today, but I always end on an optimistic note. So give me your guidance, whoever's supposed to be telling me what to say and do, okay? And I'll do my best, that's all.
Thank you, Ben. I'm going to begin with an important question, which is, did you do your push-ups this morning?
I use my push-ups as a measure of how I feel. It's not a matter of sentiment. I judge by the facts. And so this morning, after my usual 20 minutes of calisthenics, I did, in order to remind of my age, 101 push-ups. I do that every morning. Try it. And then I say, how I feel. No, I know I'm okay. Otherwise, I wouldn't know it. Okay. Have you done yours? Okay.
No.
You all look very healthy. I mean, it's just a crazy thing. You got to stay in shape. I'm so damn busy, I got no time to die. So what else I'm supposed to tell the audience? Who is the audience? The audience is the audience who is watching this in Dallas, and whatever else you can do is spread it around after that, okay? Your screen here is very good for me, except the top of your head is missing. But you can lower your head a little bit. I can see the top. Otherwise, you look like you've been decapitated even before I said anything. Oh, that's good. That's a rough place. You can see pictures behind you and all that. All
Kristen,
right.
do you want to start with the first question?
Are you ready to go?
Yes, we're ready.
All right. Sure, this is it. How long have we got to go? How brief answers, or I can answer in 2 seconds, or 2 weeks, or 2 months, whatever you want. How much? We'll just play it by ear, right? We're
Let's
all
go ahead,
ready.
Mike. Yes.
Okay. All right. You feel ready? I'm ready. Okay.
Sure. So Ben, I'd like to ask you the first question as kind of some background to the 75th anniversary of the Nuremberg trials. You were a member of the U.S. Army during World War II. Can you share with us a little bit about your work that you did in 1944 and 1945 that helped investigate and collect information about war crimes while the Allied forces were liberating concentration camps across Europe?
When the war broke out, I was still a student at the Harvard Law School. I was poor students meant I had no money. I was a good student. I was there on a full scholarship. And Japan attacked the United States. Everybody I knew went down to enlist. I wanted to go into the Air Corps because then I would learn the trade as well. I was a little bit afraid of the Navy because I had almost drowned once when I was doing life-saving exercises. Anyway, I tried the paratroopers. They said, you'll go up instead of down. The Air Force said, your feet won't reach the pedals because I was about 5 feet tall. I expected something bigger. However, eventually, I managed to get into the Army and they recognized my talent. So they made me a buck private in the artillery, about which I knew absolutely nothing. It was in that capacity that I've given my assignments, basic training. And we landed on the beaches of Normandy. There was a British sailor who was in charge of the boat pushing us up to the shore. He banged me on the back and he said, good luck, Yank. Berlin is that way. And for everybody else, the water came up to their ankles. For me, it came up to my knees. However, I managed to get ashore. And well, the stories would take too long, but eventually I was moved out of the artillery and sent to General Patton's headquarters. They told me to report there to the Judge Advocate section. And I reported, and they said, your name has been forwarded from Washington, and we have been directed to set up a war crimes branch. The name referral from Washington, I'm quite sure, although I'm not sure of it because no one told me. I had, while a student at Harvard Law School, one of the ways I had kept from starving was to various jobs, and one was to be a research assistant to Professor Sheldon Gluck, who was a criminology professor, and I was interested in crime prevention as a career. And I worked for him, and he was doing a book on war crimes. So I read everything that had ever been published on war crimes. And I sent him little notes about that. And on that basis, he wrote the book. So when they came to him and said they wanted to set up a war crimes branch because the heads of state had decided you're not going to just go around and murder all the Germans, we have to give them a trial. He said, I'll go find Benny out there. He knows all about this. By that time, the Army had also recognized my great talent, and I was a corporal, same as Hitler, same as Napoleon. So I report to the Judge Advocate, and he says, you've been forwarded your name to us. What's a war crime? So he had no idea. I said, have a seat, sir, I'll explain it. So I was the first man in the United States Army to deal with war crimes. They had no knowledge whatsoever about that. They knew about conduct on becoming a gentleman. They knew about desertion, but about crimes against humanity, except that was beyond them. So I began there. Now to come to the answer to your question. We had two categories of crimes, really. One was the concentration camps. My job was to get in there as fast as possible and collect the evidence of the trials, which could be useful as evidence against the perpetrators of crimes which were so horrible that it's really indescribable. Dead bodies all around the floor. The SS are fleeing. Sometimes the inmates would grab them, beat them to death. I saw one case where they burned the guard alive. They heated him up, first beat him up, put him in, heated him up, took him out. beat him up again and wait until he was well roasted. I saw that. It's not a nice sight. It taught me about vengeance is not our goal, I said in the opening statement. The case we present is a plea of humanity to law. And the concentration camps, I had to pretend it didn't exist in order to keep my sanity, if you can call it sanity. I just pretended this was some kind of a Hollywood show, because the people lying on the ground, their eyes were pleading for help, groveling in garbage, piles of garbage, take a piece of bread that would break their salvation. Total chaos, you know, the troops, my job was to get in there fast, and I got in fast. And what I would do there, I had written out an authorization for myself, signed it with, on behalf of General Patton, of course. I'd go to the commander of the tank battalion. I say, I'm here on orders of General Patton, carrying out a policy of the United States government. I need 10 men immediately to surround the Schreibstube, which is the office where the records were kept. And he would say, yes, sir. If he didn't act quickly, I'd say, now. And he'd move. And so then I'd get to the Schreibstube, office of the records are kept. And the Germans were very nice. They kept very good records. If they killed somebody, they wrote it down, see? And so I was able immediately to acquire various records of which transports had come on which date, how many people were sent to Auschwitz, so many people who were immediately eliminated, etc. And these were the first parts of evidence for the conditions in the concentration camps. My job was to get in and get the hell out as fast as possible. And I had to move from camp to camp. And they were very much the same. The pattern was fixed in Berlin. And the idea was, the instructions were to kill all the Jews. For that, they had to have a special operation. So the SS set up what they called Einsatzgruppen. The name was indistinguishable with what their job was, and it was deliberately done. And the assignment to the Einsatzgruppen is you kill every single Jewish man, woman, and child, period. And that's what they did, okay? When I was in the camps at that time, I didn't know about what the Einsatzgruppen had done or what their duty was. I saw the camp itself was to, if they got transferred from Auschwitz, which was a main reception area, they would be sent to another camp, Buchenwald, Dachau, and a whole host of other camps. If they were not able to work, they were killed immediately or sent back to Auschwitz. If they're able to work, the idea was work them to death. Don't feed them more than you absolutely need to keep them alive. But we have various industries, and we have to maintain them. By that time, the Germans had realized that killing them was a waste of manpower. And so they were going to preserve them to work them to death. And what I saw was the survivors of that program. Most of them looked like they were half dead already. You know, I could pick up a man who weighed 60 pounds, and he'd been a man before. The crematoria were still going. Bones were stacked up next to the crematoria, waiting to be burned, like cordwood. Looked like skin and bones. And I would say it made a permanent impression on me. But I had my job to do, and I did it. And I did it regardless of what the Army regulations were or what was expected of me. I got the job done. I went in, I got the evidence of records of what they had had and showed what they had. There were a few interesting experiences that I think are worth repeating. I came to one camp, and I don't know if it was Flossenburg or Buchenwald, I don't know which one it was. And the Schreiber, the guy on the desk who was handling the thing, was an inmate. He said, I've been waiting for you. I said, come with me. And we went together to an electrified fence around the camp. They all were that way. And he dug up a box, and we went back to the office. He opened it up, and in there, I didn't bring anything to illustrate it, but there were little folders of a club which the SS officers had had in the camp. And when they extended a meeting of some kind, it was a fun camp, they put a stamp in there. When it was book was full, they gave him a new book. And the Schreiber, the guy in charge of the camp, the inmate, he was supposed to destroy the old book. He didn't destroy them, he saved them. Now, I'm sure that if they had seen him at any time saving even one of those books, they would have put a bullet hole in his head right then and there. He took his life in his hands, and he had a whole pile of about 50 of them, which he had tucked away, and he had hidden it. And he had hidden it knowing it would be a day of reckoning, and I was that day. And I was very touched by the fact that a guy who's faced with death on all sides has enough faith in humanity that he risked his life so many times in order to save that piece of evidence. So it was one of the things which moved me as well. And there were other stories of that kind, of bravery in the time of the camp and heroism. But most of them, the people were just really, literally, things like rats in a pile of garbage, you know, scrounging for a piece of bread. And well, I would go back and write my report. I'd get the names of the people in the camp, who were the officers. I had a list of the victims and so on. And that became the basis for one of the subsequent trials, or the military trials, after the International Military Tribunal was over, or even while it was still on, actually. The US Army decided to have trials of their own. And we tried the guards in the camps who were responsible. We'd round them up and put them in a room like a gymnasium, packed up the stairs, and have 50 at a time, and say, okay, Herr Schmidt, stand up. You've been accused of being a guard in a concentration camp, which people were murdered, starved to death. What have you got to say? Nicht schuldig, not guilty. I was only obeying superior orders. Or they said I wasn't there. I was at my grandmother's funeral, you know, and I was just a cook. Every cockamamie story they could think of. The three judges were American military personnel, usually a captain, two lieutenants. They'd listen to the inmate for about 2 minutes. Then they would adjourn, and they come back and say all of the defendants, all 30 of them, or whatever the number was, are found guilty and sentenced to death. Trial closed. Nobody knows about those trials. That was military commissions, they were called. Nobody knows. I know about it. So, because I provided some of the evidence, and I was there for some of the trials by the time they began. So that was some of the early days. When the war was over, I went home. I was then a sergeant of infantry. They couldn't classify me as judge advocate thing because they only had officers there. And although I had been accepted by the man in charge of the recruitment for officers, he had been a major who sat next to me at Harvard. He said, "Ben, what are you doing here?" I said, "I want to be an officer." I was then, I think, a corporal or something. And he said, "You're in, go in." And so I went back, my first sergeant, who I must say was not a very pleasant fellow. If I had a choice of killing him or killing Oldendorf, who murdered 90,000 Jews, I'd kill him first, because Oldendorf was a better man than he was. So he just said, "You want to be an officer, eh?" And he said, "Look at this." He tore it up and threw it in the garbage. And he said, "The only way you'll get out of this outfit, soldier, is in a box." And there was nothing I could do about it. So anybody who's been in the Army knows. And he didn't endear himself to me, put it lightly. I don't want to go too much with my creed against the US Army. And that's another story. Okay, well, let me jump to the end of the war because we can't spend all this time. I wrote a lot of books. A lot of books have been written about all this. End of the war, I go home with 10 million GIs. I'm looking for a job. And I go to the law offices, Harvard Law graduate, so on, but very interesting experiences in the Army. No jobs. I asked, how many clients can you bring? I didn't have any clients. My clients had only a tattoo on their arm. They had nothing. So it was hard to find a job right away. But by chance, I was going into the details. Someone got a telegram, dear sir, from the Pentagon. They had never called me sir. 3 years of military service. I went. I met there a Colonel Mickey Marcus. Mickey Marcus, I mentioned the name because his name got to be popular in certain circles, was a Jewish boy from the Bronx, from Manhattan rather, who had gone into the Army and had gotten to West Point because he wanted to get an education. He couldn't afford an education. And he had been promoted to, by that time, it was a lieutenant colonel, and he interviewed me. And he said, look, we're looking for people to do, we want to have more trials. Not only military commission trials, but we want to have some kind of additional serious, big crimes where the French are going to set up things because they refused to set up another international trial. Each country said they can do it themselves if they want a trial. So the United States had, they called it subsequent proceedings, subsequent to the International Military Tribunal, which was on. And you know enough about that, so I don't want to hold up everybody while I go through Justice Jackson, who was an inspiring figure in those trials. And so we need people to go and do that job. And Mickey Marcus said, Ben, you've been there, you've been in the camps, you know what happened, and you've collected evidence that that's exactly what we need. And I said, well, go in the Army? He said, yeah, of course. Me in the Army? I said, in order to get me back in the Army, I was then already promoted to sergeant. Yes, I was. I said, you have to declare war on Germany again and be losing. I'm not going back into the Army because the Army was fighting me and I was fighting them. And half of the time they were also getting a lead. So I refused. So they didn't know what to do. He said, look, we'll give you a civilian rank. You'll be the same as a full colonel. And I said, do I get all the privileges of a colonel? He said, yes. I've been waiting for that because they've been stomping on me for 3 years. And I said, how long do I have to sign up for? And he said, you can quit whenever you want. That was a clincher. I said, you got a job, I'll take it. I went out, I called up this was in the Pentagon. I called up my girlfriend who had been waiting patiently for about 10 years. I went to law school and went off to win the war and so on. And I said, how would you like to go to Europe for a brief honeymoon? She said, I love it. I said, you got it. And that's how I proposed. I have a picture of her here on my desk. She died just about a year ago. And that was after 45 years of happily married life with no quarrel whatsoever. And father of 5 children, he knows more of the family. Anyway, so my entry into the Army that way was the beginning. Before I got started, however, Mickey Marcus said, there's a colonel here who wants to talk to you. And I talked and met him. It was Telford Taylor. Telford Taylor had been picked by the president. He had been experienced in Washington as a lawyer after coming out of Harvard. And he interviewed me. He said, I've been ordered by the president to set up about a dozen supplementary trials to show the details of how it was that the German people could accept the crimes which were committed by their soldiers themselves. And so we put on trial the doctors who performed medical experiments on innocent concentration camp inmates. We picked up the SS, who were a bunch of murderers included. We had to pick the judges who perverted the law by convicting anybody for political reasons, and the industrialists who worked people to death, concentration camp inmates. And this was a general pattern which they were trying to do while the IMT, International Military Tribunal trial, was already going with Justice Jackson. We'll have to come back to that in a moment. Anyway, he says he's been instructed to set that up, and he said, I've been checking on your record, Sergeant, and he said, I find that you are occasionally insubordinate. And I said, this is not correct, sir. I am not occasionally insubordinate. I'm usually insubordinate. I don't obey any orders that I know are stupid or illegal. I said, I've been checking up on you too, and I don't think you'll give me that kind of an order. He smiled. He said, okay, you come with me. And I was hired by him. We later became law partners in New York, and the war was all over, and remained good friends at all times. We had to parachute out of his plane. We wasn't a pilot, but assigned to him over the ruins of Berlin with our wives. But that's another story. But I would say we were very close friends. Okay, so there goes the war. Now, you want me to go on and tell you about what happens after a war, what you have to do? Because my life is divided in segments. There was
Hey, Ben, could you tell us a little something about your work as the head of the Nuremberg Einsatzgruppen trial, as the head of the U.S. team prosecuting the Einsatzgruppen? How was the Einsatzgruppen trial different, maybe, from some of the other trials that were prosecuted against Nazi war criminals?
They were very different, because the first assignment from Telford Taylor was, look, you know how to collect the evidence. The evidence is mostly in Berlin. Get whatever staff you need, go to Berlin, come up with the evidence for the 12 trials which were anticipated. And I did. I put together a crew of about 50 people, all former German speakers, many of them refugees. And I said, oh, if you handle the industrialists, you handle the SS, you go here, you go there, cover the different places. And one day, one of my guys comes in and he says, look what I have. Look what I have. And he has a big pile of papers here. And it's a big thing, like a loosely binder. Ereignis Meldungen aus der UdSSR. I'm showing off my German. It means events out of the Eastern Front. And in it were the daily reports by the officers, campaign officers of a group called Einsatzgruppen, which literally meant action groups, but was deliberately not given a more descriptive title, A, B, C, and D. And the German terrain, as the Germans occupied it, was divided, Poland, Russia, and so on, into different segments. And A was to handle it. Russia, the other was to handle the Romanians and so on. And they wrote their daily reports. And they had printed 99 copies of that. And I had the distribution list for the 99 people who received them, who later said I didn't know anything about it. It was a daily chronicle of how many units, how many Jews were killed by that particular unit, where and when, and who was in charge. Dream thing. I took a little adding machine and started to add them up. When I reached 1 million people murdered that way, I said, that's enough. I took a sample. I took the next plane down from Berlin to Nuremberg. I said, General Taylor, he'd been promoted to general, we have to put on a new trial. He says, we can't. The Pentagon has already approved our budget to sign. All the lawyers have been assigned. They're not going to agree to a new trial. I said, you can't let these guys go. I've got this murder in my hand, mass murder, and you just can't let them go. And he said, well, can you do it in addition to your other cases, your other work? And I said, sure. So he said, okay, you do it, okay? And so it came to pass that I was assigned what turned out to be the biggest murder trial in human history. I've disappeared from the screen here. I guess they were frightened. My screen has disappeared. Are you hearing me okay?
Oh, yes, we're fine. We
Okay.
can hear you and see you.
Okay. That's even better. I don't have to look at myself. He is going to be the chief prosecutor. I've picked up a few other lawyers who some of the other cases I wanted to get rid of. And I drew up the indictments. And one of the problems that I think is worth mentioning is in the opening statement, I thought to myself, look, I was limited to 22 defendants for the ridiculous reason that was the number tried in the International Military Tribunal trial against Goering. And that's the only seats we had in the courtroom. So I was limited. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And I thought, well, you can't have justice. You can't talk about justice. They kill 1 million people and you try 22. That's not going to be just, no matter what you do. So that if we are going to have some significance to this trial, let it be more than just a search for justice which you can't reach. We should establish the principle of law that all people are entitled to live in peace and dignity, regardless of their race or creed. Because the people, most of them were murdered because they were Jews, also because they were communist officials. And I thought if I can get a principle of law which would protect everybody, then it would be much more meaningful than whatever we did with these 22 mass murderers. And so I never asked for the death penalty. I asked for a principle of law that would protect everybody by upholding human rights through the rule of law. And that's what I asked for. I said in my opening, may it please your honors, it is with sorrow and with hope that I here present, or we here present, a case, the murder of over 1 million innocent people, innocent and defenseless human beings. Vengeance is not our goal, nor do we seek merely a just retribution. The case we present is a plea of humanity to law. That was my thing. And the 3 judges, in due course, I rested my case in 2 days. 2 days. I didn't call a single witness because I don't need a single witness. I got the names of the guys who committed, who wrote the reports. It's top secret. I'm not going to confuse this trial with anything else. I'm just going to ask these bastards, is this your name? Did you sign this? Is this how many people you killed? They take it from there. And so I was able to rest the case in 2 days. I convicted all of them. And 12 of them were sentenced to death. I didn't ask for the death penalty, and I was rather surprised because the chief judge was Michael Masmano of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. And he was rather a joyful fellow, and he had his naval uniform underneath his robe, and he'd be kibitzing a lot of the time with things, and I didn't think that was the right place for it. And but when we came to the judgment, it came to the sentencing a couple of days later, it was very dramatic. The courtroom, if some of you may know the pictures of it, is right over the prison. The prison is right underneath, and it comes into the courtroom through a little van, a lift, and it's a small, about this big, and from the basement up into the room court. There, the doors opened, sliding doors opened, and the prisoner steps out, puts the earphones on, and listens and says, for the crimes of which you have been convicted, which were spelled out the day before, this tribunal sentences you to death by hanging. They bow, take off the earphones, step back, boom, the doors were closed. Next one comes out. Oh, for the crimes of which you committed, this tribunal sentences you to death by hanging. Boom, boom. Death by hanging, death by hanging, death by hanging. I thought my head was going to bust. Dead silence in the courtroom. No applause, no moan, no nothing. Everything's quiet. death by hanging, death by hanging, death by hanging. It was a custom by that time for the chief prosecutor of any of the 12 trials to invite his staff to a party to celebrate the end of their particular trial. And I had also arranged that people would meet in my home for celebration. I didn't have the feeling to want to go to my own party. I had a splitting headache. I went home and went to bed. And so that's why was I that way? I don't know. But it was a very grim experience. Now, my face has disappeared from this screen. Can I get it back somehow? Anybody here? Carlotta, anybody here?
Hello, Ben?
The screen is this way.
Oh, you were disconnected. Hello?
No, you're here.
Oh, we're
We are here.
still here.
Okay, they're here, Ben. Don't worry.
I don't worry. I don't look at myself.
But they can listen to you.
All right, you hear me all right? But it's
We can,
yes.
Okay. Okay, don't touch anything. Don't move.
I didn't. I know, but I don't think moving is my
Okay,
job.
happens sometimes, Ben. Okay.
All right, so there we get to the end of the trial. Now, the trial, as well indicated, was a very dramatic experience. I had never wanted to talk, and I never talked to any of the defendants eye to eye. I had investigators and researchers, and I told them to interview each of the defendants. I want to know everything from the day he was born till the day he died. So I knew the background of all the defendants, and it was on that basis and the documentation that I was able to present the case and rest the prosecution's case in short order. The only time I talked to any of the defendants was after they had read the sentencing, and I wanted to talk to one of them in particular. He was Dr. Otto Ollendorf, a general in the SS. He, according to his report, had killed 90,000 Jews. And he was asked on the trial, do you admit that your unit under your direct command killed 90,000 Jews? He said, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? This is your report. You signed it. It's top secret. He said, yes, but you know, the men like to brag about the body count. And so they exaggerated sometimes. I said, well, would you say 70,000, 80,000? Yeah, that would be right. It was interesting to me that they would brag about the body count. They were so proud of how many they killed. Later, I'll tell you, oh, I was against it. You know, I was bearing superior orders. Bullshit. They were bragging about the body count, and that was a giveaway for them. So, but he was being honest. He said that, and I knew he was the father of 5 children. He had also testified in the International Military Tribunal trial about the killings going on by the SS. And he was well educated. I'm sure he was kind to his cats and dogs. And I thought, what the hell? I'll go down and talk to him. And I was sure he was going to hang. And I went down to the underneath the courtroom, and he's in a cell. I opened a little door, opened the window, and I said to him in German, "Can I do something for you, Mr. Ollendorf?" And he said, "You'll see I was right. The Russians are going to come in. The Jews in America will suffer for this too. And what you were doing to me, it's not just." I slammed the door shut on him. That was enough. He was repeating the argument he had made during the trial with proof of documents submitted, books by German experts by the ton, saying that self-defense is permissible, anticipatory self-defense, which is what he was arguing is permissible. And the judges, led by Masmano, said that is no defense. It's stupid, it's dangerous, and it's not the law. And they ignored it. It became of great interest to me not very long ago when our president of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump, in his first appearance before the United Nations, the American government is always invited, like other governments, to make a statement from their head of state to the assembly. He said, and I want to warn the North Koreans, if they threaten us or any of our allies, I will totally destroy you. And I'm listening to this. I said, Mr. President, I'm saying to myself, how do you just totally destroy a country? North Korea? You go in and you machine gun everybody? What do you have in mind by threatening to totally destroy everybody? And on the grounds of anticipatory self-defense, that's no valid defense. I was shocked to find the President of the United States making the same excuse, alibi, as Dr. Otto Ollendorf, who was hanged by the neck for 8 minutes till he was pronounced dead. I was invited to come to the hangings. I declined the honor, but they sent it to me on film. That is now in the Holocaust Museum in Washington. So that was a post-war experience, and takes you right up to the trials. Now, my life continued after that. I said, punishing the criminals is only a selection of the criminals, a sampling. What about the victims? We have to do something for the victims. And of which my friend, Dr. Basler, was one of them. So I got working on, and I was approached. The initiative didn't come from me, actually. It came from a representative of the American Insurance Distribution Committee, which was a leading Jewish charity. Their headquarters at that time was in Paris. And they sent somebody up and he said, we want to set up a program to recover the property of the Jews who were murdered. Because normally, if somebody dies and doesn't have any heirs, the property escheats, as they say, to the next members of the family. And they said it would be outrageous if they murder everybody in the family for the government, which was responsible for the murders, if they were the ones who would inherit the property. And so we wanted to set up another successor organization, the Jewish Restitution Successor Organization. And we would like you to set that up for us. My trial was over. I was still doing other work in connection with the other cases. But it was an appeal. I called up my wife, who was by that time with me in Germany. She said, how long do they want you to stay? We wanted to go home. And I said, they asked me for a commitment for 2 years. Well, she said, if they want only 2 years, I know you'll get it done in 1 year. So how can you say no? The proceeds were to be used for the benefit of the survivors. So I said, okay, I'll take it, but I'm not going back into the army for anything. So they said, we'll give you, a civilian rank. This was a discussion took place in the Pentagon after that. We'll give you a civilian rank of a full colonel. I said, can I then tell the lieutenant colonels where to go? They said, you do whatever you want. They were eager to have me there. Okay. I said, I'll take it for a year. Okay. 10 years later, I came back from Nuremberg with my 4 children. So the job was to set up a program to recover the heirless Jewish property. And that was a mission impossible, if we want to go into that too. This is going to be a book on it right away. First thing, I had to declare myself the Director General. I was the only employee. I was the Director General of the JRSO, Jewish Restitution Successor Organization. I figured the Germans are going to be impressed with the director and the general. Oh boy. And then I had to raise money because I had about 3 months before the filing deadline was to expire for the submission of those claims. So I was supposed to, in 3 months, find out all the claims which were available from people who had been plundered and their properties taken away from all over Germany. Oh, so I went to see General Clay, who was the commander-in-chief there for the American zone. And I said, I need an extension of the filing deadline for the military government law. He said, I can't give it to you. I said, but I can. You can't expect me to go and find all these properties and companies. I'm the only employee. I got 3 months to find them. I thought, I can't do that. He said, well, I don't want to extend the deadline because I don't know when the Russians are going to attack. This was a very bad conversation. The tensions were already there. And I said, well, I've got to have money in order to hire additional staff. He said, well, get whatever you want. Go down and talk to Joe Blow, who's in charge of finance. Tell him I okayed it. And you got to get it done by the end of the year, filing deadline. So I go down, I see Joe Blow, I don't remember his name was. And I said, I'm coming from the general. We're setting up a new program and I need money in order to hire new staff, equipment, so on. He said, oh, how much you want? I said, give me $1 million. It's like going and asking for $1 million. It wasn't his money. It was occupational funds the Germans were going to pay. So I get $1 million to get me started. Oh, I requisition about 30 Jeeps and I hire all kinds of drivers and people and start training them. And I send them to every real estate registry in Germany. Every town, every country had their own registries. I said, if it looks like a Jewish name, claim it. So we collected claims. And just as the day or two before the filing deadline expired, I got into the Army Jeep. Not a Jeep, it was an ambulance. We loaded the claims, big forms, of course, into this ambulance. And I filed 163,000 claims. So many of them were somebody who had the misfortune of whose name sounded Jewish, so claim for them too. and we had the problem weeding out those who weren't even Jewish. We had some embarrassing moments, some high German officials and so on. But this was all details, and I had a crew of about 25 people working 24 hours in a big hall that we, through the Lithuanian and Latvian club, which was in there, guys who had retreated, had worked for the army in those territories and had a big club. I chased them all out and I set up these tables and got typewriters, and we worked 3-hour shifts. I had one of my deputies was on 8 hours, another one was 8 hours, and I was on for 8 hours too. We took 8-hour shifts to get those 163,000 claims filed. I called up General Clay. I said, we don't need an extension. We've claimed everything. And we did. What I didn't know then, which I soon found out, was mission impossible. And I'll tell you why. And how I got out of it, because these are interesting stories. We have time for all these stories. I filed the claims, but what had happened in the meanwhile, the Reichsmark, the German Reichsmark, was declared abandoned and substituted with the Deutsche Mark, which was, and they gave it for every 100 Reichsmarks that you had, you would get 10 Deutsche Mark. It was 10 to 1. So the currency was worthless, of the old German Nazi currency, and the people got 10% so they could start their new lives. Okay, so I come to the first thing, is a typical. And Schmidt, you acquired this house in 1935. The Jews were ordered out. You paid 100,000 marks to him. You have to return it now, and you get back, instead of 100,000 marks, worthless marks, you get 100 Deutsche marks. So what do you mean 100? I gave him 1,000. Yeah, I know, but the law says you only get back 10 to 1. If I give you Reichsmark, it's just paper. So you're lucky you get 100. What do you mean? the Americans bombed the roof. I replaced the roof. Why do I have to pay for the American bomb the roof? And I paid off the mortgage, etc., etc., etc. Pretty soon, these conversations ended up with us saying Hitler should have killed you first, you know? So, in fact, I was generating a lot of anti-Semitism. I argued the case before the Court of Restitution Appeals, which was an Allied court set up by the Allied lawyers, to determine whether what I was doing was lawful and required under the law. And it was clear to me. And but they didn't quite understand it. So there was a lot of resentment. So how do you get out from that? It's another trick. This thing doesn't go from one day to the next. This is a period of a couple of years. I devised a scheme. I said to the state governments, look, you think the people are forced to pay more than the property is worth because of the conversion rate. I am bound by the law to apply 10 to 1. That's what the law is for everybody. But I'll sell you my claims at a reasonable price. Israel was already at war. They were clamoring for money. The survivors had nothing. They were clamoring for money. I was clamoring for money, not for myself. My salary would starve out. I said, I'll sell them to the states. You take it. If you want to be generous with the guy, you can be generous. You want to hold the property for 10 years, see if it advances, probably increase in value over the time, then you'll get your money back. And I convinced almost all of them to accept all the claims back. And there was only one state which refused, Burton, Burton, and because they had a lawyer who had represented the Germans in negotiations we had later, and he was an advisor to them, and he was very sympathetic to our cause. Really, he was a good lawyer, and he said, "No, Ferencz is right. They got to pay, you know." And he refused to accept it. I said, "Hey," I'm starting to think of his name again. This slipped out of my mind, but I said, "Hey, don't do me any favors. I got to get out of here. I've got to get the money now." He said, "Yeah, what you're doing," he said, "is right. They pay back in accordance with the law. What they gave, they get back 10 to 1, and that's it. And if they fix the roof, that's their business. Nobody else's." Anyway, so that program had its problems, legal problems, practical problems, political problems of all kinds. And then it got even more interesting. We're going to go into that. One day in 1952, the German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer, a devout Catholic, made a speech in which he said, terrible crimes have been committed against the Jewish people by Germany, and it imposes on us an obligation to make amends. And with that, Jewish organizations met and said, "What does it mean, make amends? What do you ask for, how and when and what?" Benny, he's the expert. He knows. He's been negotiating this stuff now for a few years in Germany. So I was the advisor to that. As another sidelight, the first meeting took place in New York. I think it was in the Biltmore Hotel. While we were there, some rough Jewish hoodlums pushed the door open and wanted to disrupt the whole meeting. "How dare you ask for money for our parents?" And it was a very delicate subject. They felt it was a betrayal of Jewish honor, and everybody who was involved in that should be killed. And that was their plan, and they were organized for that purpose. Nobody really knows too much about this story. They were pushed out by the Irish cops, and nobody was killed at that meeting. I don't think they came with guns either. At least there was no shooting taking place. But it reflected a basic problem which existed and still exists to this day. The people who felt it was a betrayal of Jewish honor to ask for any money from the murderers. And they felt this is tainted, We want no part of it. And many of them accepted nothing. Many of them, when we got a judgment for them, they wouldn't take it. We settled with some of the IG Farber and other companies like that. So that was another facet of the problem. I mention it only because there were many such facets, things we never could have anticipated. And they're dealing with a human problem. All right, I'm afraid I'm running too long on all this program. I'll be here forever. Well, we set up the restitution programs. When I left Germany, think we had gotten about $50 billion from Germany. And thousands of claims. We had to negotiate the Bundesentschädigungsgesetz, which was a indemnification law, providing the rights of each individual for compensation. How do you compensate the loss of life? We decided that very, very quickly. We didn't spend an hour on it. By we, I mean a group, a consortium of leading Jewish organizations who are on the board of directors of a thing called the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany. And material was put in that we were not asking for a loss of life. We said, we're not going to get into a debate that my grandmother was worth less than your grandfather, and so on. Every human life is precious. We came up with a dollar figure on it. And we would prove damage to health. He lost an occupational job. He was crippled. He was a violin player. He broke his arms. We could measure this to some extent that an insurance company would do and present a claim based upon payment of money. And we did. And it applied equally to Jews and non-Jews, and which was also a basic principle in which I operated. And that program is still going on. Many people are still getting pensions as a result of that program. So now the next comes the most important thing. How do you prevent it from happening again? So at one bright day, I said, Benny, I can't afford to feed my family on what I'm earning. I have to go home. And I notified the organizations, and I'm sorry, but I have to leave. And I returned to the United States. There, in short order, I formed a partnership with Telford Taylor, who had similar experience when he got home. Excellent Harvard lawyer, very fine lawyer, very fine man, really, now deceased. So I returned to the States and just work on getting compensation for the victims. Now, we had a country that was totally devastated. There'd never been a precedent in human history where a defeated nation in war paid individual survivor compensation for damages to them during the war period. And so it was unprecedented. And there, we had to be very creative to how do you get money from a country which has nothing to give? Well, first we had to have an agreement. We had an agreement signed by Konrad Adenauer with my pen. I don't have the pen here anymore. Formal meeting, a lot of publicity and all that. And we went about it, and the German government began to pay. State governments paid something, federal government paid something. The East Germans said, we didn't commit any crimes. That was all happened by the Nazis over there. And they refused to pay anything. And there was a long negotiation I carried on there without much success. At one point, they gave me a check for $1 million. They sent it back on instruction of Nahum Goldman, who was the chairman of the claims conference. I would have said, okay, that's the first installment. But so this all became part of a world program various times. But I can say now in retrospect, the program is still going on. People are still Nazi victims, Jews and non-Jews alike, getting pensions from the German government if they were disabled. And it's cost the German government a lot of money. And I think that leads me to the bigger problem. How do you prevent it from happening again? So I began to write lots of books. Now I'm going to disappear from here for a moment. Oh, you got my face back. I'll show you something because I didn't expect this would be coming up, but I'll show it to you. La, 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 la. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not selling books. I don't make money on selling books. We have this book here. See that? Is it upside down? No. What it says is, in German, war crimes, restitution, and prevention. That's an outline of what my goals were. Stop the war, punish the people responsible, restitution to the victims, and preventing it from happening again. It's 750 pages. Unfortunately, half of it is in German. It's based upon my archives at the Holocaust Museum in Washington. I'm looking for some pictures here. They must be here somewhere. So that is out. This is another one out fairly recently. And there are a couple more on the way now. This is a readable book in German. So the Germans are busy repenting. So anyway, let me get myself set up here again. Okay. Trying to prevent war from happening again. That has been my principal occupation, I would say, maybe 10, 20 years now, after we got through this restitution and punishment of the criminals and all that. How do you stop it? And war has been glorified for centuries. The flag is flying, soldiers are marching in nice uniform, and here comes this little jerk from Transylvania, not Pennsylvania. He says you can't go to war anymore because if you do that, you're going to kill everybody. And I reached that conclusion at a meeting in St. Petersburg, Russia, about 10 years ago. It was some sort of a peace conference. And I was the only American there, together with a general who was also not in Syria. I was in Syria, of course. But, you know, he introduced himself. I'm the only other American here, and we had breakfast together. And I asked him, what are you up to, General? And he said, well, I'm working on the cyberspace problem. I never heard of the cyberspace problem. I said, what's that? He said, well, you know, we can now cut off the electrical grid on planet Earth. I said, really? I said, well, how long would it take for everybody to die? Just cut off the electrical grid, the water doesn't run, the lights can't run, the radios don't nothing work. He said, well, I'm not aware of any studies which have yet been done on that subject. But my guess is that it would depend upon how much water they had. If they had enough water, they probably could survive for about a week. Yeah, nice. I said, so how do you go about dealing with that problem? He said, well, difficulty is that the Russians can do the same. We were meeting in St. Petersburg, Russia. And he said, I'm on my way to China now because China can do the same. And we're working on it. Now, of course, everything has been top secret since then. A lot of it has been literature at various points about cyberspace weapons. We do spend millions of dollars every day on perfecting our cyberspace weapons. They will have the capacity to kill everybody on this planet. If we get into a war which force is permissible or acceptable, I don't want to be here because well, nothing else want to be here. I don't see why this planet should be the only one in the universe which has life on it. I wrote a little book called Planethood. I have it somewhere around here. It was a throwaway book. We printed 1 million copies. And the theme of that book was that we are all inhabitants of one small planet in a big universe. And we must deal with the resources on this planet. so that everyone who inhabits this planet can live in peace and human dignity without fear of being killed. That was the theme of that. No more nationhood, no more neighborhood, planetary thinking. As I see the epidemic we're in now, we were not prepared for planetary thinking. We watch when it breaks out someplace and hope it doesn't come here, etc. We have other planetary problems, water, environment. We are not yet thinking in planetary terms. So I tell people, look, kids, you got to settle your disputes by peaceful means only. The use of armed force is prohibited, and it's in accordance with the UN Charter, by peaceful means only. Because once you get into a fighting thing and it escalates, I know, and by this time it's public knowledge, otherwise I wouldn't be discussing it here, that we have the capacity to kill everybody. Isn't that nice? I fooled them. I lived over 100 years. They can't get me. So that's the world in which we live. And I am much concerned about that because the top people in the administration, they know that. And they don't know how to get out of it. They use these traditional means. I have the whole file here of John Bolton, a very loudmouth, frequent voice. He accompanied the president on trips to Russia and on trips to China, and I don't know where. He said, look, we are the most powerful nation in the world. Oh, we are Americans. We don't commit crimes. We don't need a court. Come back to the court alone. If we don't like what they're doing, kill them. That's their point of view. And it's a point of view which is shared by many people. And it keeps me awake at night. And what I do about that is I lecture to students. I understand this is going to Texas, the home of Texas. I'm grateful to my friend here who's been aware of these hazards for a long time. How do you deal with it? I had some correspondence recently with General, my battery for names is run down. But he was a candidate for president, a 5-star general. And he reacted, as I did, to an order by the president, a presidential order, PO, from President. And in it, he said that the International Criminal Court, if they dare to try to hold any American responsible, we will penalize the staff, including the chief of staff, chief prosecutor, who's black, who's from the Gambia, Bensouda, and we will block their bank accounts, and we will arrest them. And this was endorsed immediately by the Secretary of State, Attorney General, and in decrees saying, in effect, it's another attempt. They have tried similar things in the past to destroy the International Criminal Court. I have been working to create the International Criminal Court because if you're going to have a peaceful world, you have to have some other means for settling your disputes besides going out and killing the guy you don't agree with. And the best way of doing that is to have a court of some kind, an objective court, which will decide it. And even if it's a wrong decision, it'll be better than the current system where you go and kill everybody until you get tired. And then you declare, each one declares victory, and then they start killing each other again. That's the current system. And we're spending billions and billions of dollars on perfecting the weapons for that system. And the purpose is to kill more people more effectively, instead of using the money to satisfy the legitimate complaints of many people who are desperate because they have no food, they have no money, or they have no environment, whatever it is. Instead of using the money to help the people and eliminate their justified complaints, we use the money to kill the people in the hope that, ha, 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 then we will show them who is in charge. And that's the theme of John Bolton. And it's still going, and I got a file on him. And I hear, America is the greatest. Deutschland über alles. Sounds like Germany all over again. So I tell the young people that it's a dangerous world, a very dangerous world. And maybe we'll be like all the other planets in space. No life on it. I hope not. But I've done the best one guy can. One little guy from Transylvania who lived most of his life in poverty. All the money that I have earned in the stock market and real estate speculation, I give back to charity. I will go out the way I came in with nothing. That's my goal. I don't know how soon that'll be. I got to keep a little bit just in case. I don't think I'll be here eternally, but I'd rather not have to beg for anything in my last days. So I thank all those who are of the same mind, who recognize the need for new thinking, particularly among the young people, to settle your disputes by peaceful means only. And no matter what the settlement is, you're going to be better off than if you say you're going to settle it by killing the other guy because you think you're better than he is. That's my message. And if I can relay that with your help, particularly in Texas, these always been fighters and brave men. We've had a country which had no courts either. They were Wild West. You want to go back to Wild West? If you don't like what somebody's done, you lynch them or you kill them. Are we back on that again? We have made good progress. I want to point to the progress because I never end on a sour note. The progress is remarkable. First of all, I'm still alive. Nobody killed me. That's a miracle. There have been a few attempts. Secondly, we have made enormous strides in the field of human rights protection. Thanks to Michael Basler, from others. We have universal declarations of human rights. We have the International Criminal Court was finally established after years of labor, in which I was in one of these pushing very hard for it. And as a recognition, they gave me the honor of making the closing remarks in their first case. It was against an African for using child soldiers. And I did the closing remarks and I repeated what I had repeated in the Einspruch case. It's a plea of humanity to law. We've got to replace the killing of people as an act of government by helping the people instead. And so that's what I do. I thank all of you who are sitting here and all those who may hear this message for the help you can give in that direction. It's not easy, but the progress is there. We do have many courts now functioning. They don't function very well because they're newborn babes. And some people don't understand it. Some people don't want to cooperate. It's difficult to do at best because you have to learn the foreign language. You have to get the evidence in the countries, all of which I have done in the earliest days. And I know how difficult it is to present a case to a fair jury and a fair trial and hold only those who are found guilty responsible for what they do. So that's my message to the people in Texas and the rest of the world. My appreciation to our friends here who are giving us a chance to convey this message. And I have 3 pieces of advice which I always give. 1, never give up. 2, never give up. 3,
never give up.
That's it. That's it. I hear you all screaming, never give up. I wish you the best of luck. Good luck to you all. Thank you for giving me this privilege.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Ben, for spending time with us.